everyone. Welcome back to the Book Cave with me, Jenny. So today it is time for my March wrap-up. And as I said in my April TBR video, I didn't get to a whole lot of the books I intended to this month. However, I did get to a bunch of other books. So yeah, I'm just going to jump right in and let you all know what Whalefall is definitely an interesting book, and I enjoyed seeing the actual research that had been done, because you could just tell the way the whale was described, the way the squid was described, the way the diving was described. There was obviously a lot of research done, and the whole thing of each chapter being either a year or how much PSI Jay had left in his tank really added to the overall feeling of urgency that was in the book. And yeah, I definitely feel like I had to slug a little bit until the dive actually happened. But it was interesting to see Jay get ready for the dive and how he put all the the fins, the wetsuit, and the descriptions of all of that, just because of the fact that I've never been scuba diving. And so I always enjoy kind of seeing different things. And yeah, overall, I could definitely recommend this. There was one little bit that I kind of rolled my eyes at a little bit, but I guess I can overlook that, especially considering how young Jay is. Going into this, I knew what the premise was, that it was about a son who went looking for his father's body after they had kind of a rough relationship. However, I didn't realize that he was a 17-year-old boy. And, obviously being that age, the tough relationship had parts that, to me at least, I was why was this even an issue? And, then there were other parts that I could see why it was. But yeah, overall, I definitely recommend this if you realistic science in your books. If you I would say this is almost a horror, and also a coming of age, and also kind of literary fiction, because it does have some kind of experimental ideas. But I just felt it was very, very well executed, and yeah, a very high recommendation from me. So, Orbital by Samantha Harvey is a Booker Prize winner. And I found a link to a quiz that was supposed to tell you if this is your reading taste, this is the Booker Prize winner you should read. And that is the book that I got from it. And I will say I did like it. I liked the first quarter the best, and then I felt it did get just a little repetitive, and the big grandiose thoughts and the really touching thoughts I felt were mostly there in that first 25%. But overall, I did like it. I believe I gave it a 4-star. So it's definitely not a bad book. and it is very short. It's 208 pages, and it is written as almost like a stream of consciousness as you follow these 6 different astronauts in the space station, and you kind of jump back and forth as to who you're following. And yeah, I will say it was definitely interesting, and it is something that, if you're interested in space, I do think you would like. However, if you're not really interested in like space or the International Space Station or anything like that, I do believe you would probably find it boring. So it's one of those that's definitely not for everybody, but it did work for me. I finished Vampires of El Norte this month, and it was definitely not what I was expecting. I was expecting there to be like a lot more about the vampires, and there really wasn't all that much about it. It was much more a historic fiction, which was fine, just not what I was expecting. And I feel like I would have enjoyed it more had I known that it was that rather than like a historical fantasy or horror. I did like the characters. I felt like Nana and Nestor were very well fleshed out, and I enjoyed, seeing them come to terms with what had happened and the mistakes that were made. And I do definitely recommend this if you like character studies that have a little bit of that paranormal aspect to them. So I read another Catherine Center book, or I guess I should say I listened to it, and that is The Rom-Commers, which follows Emma and Charlie, who are both screenwriters, although due to circumstances outside of her control, Emma hasn't really ever submitted a screenplay to be produced. And she winds up working with Charlie, who normally does kind of more like action movies. And at this point, he needs to write a romantic comedy. And the first script he writes is just not very good. And so Emma has a friend in Hollywood who is an agent, and he gets wind of this and is able to pull some strings. And yeah, this was a fun little book. I did feel like there were some actual like laugh out loud funny parts. Most notably when there's going to be a line dancing scene in the movie, and Emma tells Charlie, well, we need to go line dancing then so that you can actually see it. And then he's in kind of a bad mood that day, doesn't want to go. And she says, well, I'll go without you, and just maybe I'll find a 6-foot cowboy to, have fun with. And as she goes to leave, Charlie goes, you're not going without me. You're not going to find no 6-foot cowboy. And you can just kind of see how, like, he's protective of her. And, like, obviously at that point, feelings are starting to develop. And then the best part is they get there, and it is indeed a 6-foot cowboy teaching. And yeah, there's a bunch of little things like that sprinkled throughout, but that's the one that really stuck out to me. And I love, like, how much depth the characters wind up having, and we get to learn a lot of their backstory, and the backstories they have make sense as to why they have the reservations they do about love, romance, or even just, I believe in it, but for this reason cannot pursue it. And yeah, this is definitely one of my more favorite ones of Catherine Center, up there with Hello Stranger. And yeah, I will definitely be checking out more of hers. I have 2 more of her audiobooks borrowed right now, so I will be getting to those over, the next couple of weeks, hopefully, and finish them, all this month. But yeah, if you like Catherine Center, or if you like more contemporary romance books that are very character driven, I definitely feel like you would like any of her books. And I feel like this one in particular is a lot more geared towards the comedy side, but it does have some pretty serious discussions as well. So it's really just overall a good mix. I finished listening to another Catherine Center book. This one is What You Wish For, and this is actually related to Happiness for Beginners, which unfortunately my library does not have as an audiobook. And I'm definitely interested in reading that after the little bonus story that we had in this book. But overall, I did enjoy this, and I did feel like this is one of the better Catherine Center books. I did like it. One thing I did dislike is it seems to me like almost all the women characters have issues with other women characters. So we have Duncan and his sister, and when Sam sees him with his sister, she gets immediately jealous, which I do understand that sometimes that happens and you can't control it, but it does seem almost more like a choice sometimes, and this one did in particular. And I also felt like, at least at the beginning, Sam was kind of an annoying character, and the fact that she just up and left because of her feelings for Duncan was kind of like, you seriously moved that far? And yeah, I get that, yeah, maybe that does happen, but it just seemed a little overblown for me. However, once we got to the halfway point, I did start liking Sam more. And Duncan, I kind of suspected what had happened from the beginning when he walked in and some of the comments he made. So he didn't annoy me as much. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy it. Those are just kind of my little nitpicky things. I felt like when it came down to it, Duncan and Sam really did have a good chemistry, and they clearly cared about each other, and I just really enjoyed how that all worked out. And the fact that this book really did have a lot to say about, schools and medical issues and things like that, and being there for the people you care about, and that's just, you have to choose to be there. So yeah, I definitely do recommend it, and I do recommend, probably I would say, reading Happiness for Beginners first, just to kind of get a little more of the background of how Duncan was prior to this book. And I will definitely be looking out for that one. I finished listening to How to Walk Away, and I do have to say I really liked this book. I felt like this one we didn't really have the main character having issues with other women, and the whole plot of her becoming like her own woman despite everything that she had went through you know, not just falling into like depression and stuff. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed seeing the relationship that she developed with her sister, and I loved seeing Maggie or Margaret and Ian, their relationship developing. I love the fact that he gives her that nickname because of, well, something that's kind of spoilery that is in the bonus chapter. And that's another thing I really liked. I did quite suspect that Cassie was the firewoman who saved her, and we get confirmation of that in that part. And I don't really feel like that's a spoiler, just because it is pretty obvious when the plane crash happens that it is Cassie, at least if you've read things you save in a fire. So yeah, I definitely highly recommend this. Definitely, you know, especially for like the friendships and the very, very slow burn romance, and just the overall like uplifting message of this book. And I am excited to get my hands on the Love Haters when it comes out. I want to say it comes out in April. I do have the audiobook on hold for my library already, so definitely excited for that one as well. So I just finished listening to what I think is Taylor Jenkins Reid's second published book, and that is After I Do. And it follows mainly Lauren, but it does also follow her sister Rachel, her brother Charlie, and then her mother and grandmother as well. And basically, Lauren has been married to Ryan for 10 years. Or no, I'm sorry, she's been married to him for 6 years, and they were together for like 4 or 5 years before that. So they've been together a very long time, and you know, things are just starting to change. And very early on in the book, things come to a head, and they decide to take a year-long break and just not talk to each other or anything, to try to come back together and be like ready to love again. And this follows what her 2 younger siblings think of this, as well as her mother and grandmother, and you kind of get to see how they all pursue relationships. And it's really just a character study and a study of life, and it's very, very well written and has some very poignant moments, especially near the end. And this is slightly different from Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books. I feel like she kind of has 2 types of books, and she even says this in her in the little author's note. You have a conversation with her and with the narrator, and they're like talking to each other. And Taylor Jenkins Reid even says that she feels like, you know, some of her books are about the average person, which is like Forever Interrupted, One True Loves, was it Maybe in Another Life, and then After I Do. That's kind of like the average person living in California. And then you have your Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones, Malibu Rising, and Carrie Soto. And that's all kind of like what's going on in pop culture around this time. And I feel like those 4 have a little more gossipy tone, whereas the other 4 are kind of more personal. And I mean, obviously, while you do get a lot of character work in the famous 4 books, it's also very much shown to be that, like, their fame affects them very much, and this kind of shows how not having fame can affect, and, like, the different thought processes that go into things. But yeah, I really love all of her books, and this was definitely one of her earlier ones. I'm not going to say it's my favorite. I want to say my favorite is maybe In Another Life, between those 4. And then I think Daisy Jones and the Six is probably my favorite of the famous 4. But yeah, I would say definitely, if you like Taylor Jenkins Reid, to check this out. If you like emotional romances that have, like, a lot of ups and downs, and it tends to be more of things going on outside of the relationship that are focused on, then I really feel like you would like any of her books, but this one in particular. I finished the manga series Beyond the Clouds, and this is a pretty short 5-volume series, and I have kind of mixed feelings about it. I did enjoy the story. I did like the characters. However, the art itself was very rough and sketchy, which I do like it in the context of the story. This is like a steampunk story, and I feel like it definitely fits that. So I do like that part, although I'm not really a huge fan of the more sketchy type of drawings. And I feel like also the main plot just kind of became overlooked. So it's more of just like a cozy travel story rather than a let's find out who this girl is, because that's basically the whole premise, is that this 16-year-old boy lives in a town that is called Yellowtown because there's a lot of industry there, and then he is a inventor / repairman, and so he goes to the junk pile to find useful things, and he finds a girl with wings and basically wants to help her find her memory, help her find her home, help her heal because she's injured. And so that's basically what the whole book or the whole series is supposed to be. But like I said, it just kind of becomes traveling, and they meet people, and you will get like you will get a question that Theo asks, or that Mia asks, to try to figure out Mia's past. But then you maybe get, one question in a volume that's just like, oh no, sorry, I don't know, but hey, let's do this. And then just kind of meanders. So, I mean, it's not necessarily bad, but it's definitely not what I was expecting, especially with some of the darker overtones that we do see throughout the series. I feel like maybe if it had been either another 5 volumes, or if it had perhaps cut down on the traveling, then we would have gotten more of that. But I really did like seeing the world and the way like all the steampunk elements were brought in. So it's one of those that it's more vibes than plot, I would say. And I feel like if you go into it knowing that, then you would probably enjoy it more. I did give it a 3 stars, so it's not a bad series by any stretch. I finished out the month with a graphic novel, and that is The Strange Case of Harleen and Harley. And the main thing I really enjoyed about this is that it was based off of, obviously, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it had quotes for like each part of this graphic novel. It was started with a quote from the book, and it was also full color art, which I really enjoyed. For some reason, the DCYAs like this don't like to go full color sometimes. They prefer to do like dual color only, or even just like very muted colors. But yeah, I did enjoy this, and I did enjoy the fact that we actually get a lot of Pam in here. And yeah, there were a few things that I felt like were maybe oversimplified, like the whole thing with prison reform. I just felt like that was a little oversimplified. However, I do also understand that these are like younger characters, so they don't necessarily realize that things aren't always as simple as they think. And the other thing I did like is that we get Harleen's gymnastics as well. And I liked seeing her evolve as a character throughout this book. So overall, I would say if you like the character of Harley Quinn, that you would like this. If you like a coming of age story, you would probably like this. And if you are a fan of the other DCYAs, you would probably like this. However, if none of those are true, this would probably be a skip. Oh, one other thing I did like is that we get a Jack Napier character in here, and I really like the way he was incorporated, and his part in the story, and also his design I just really liked as well. So yeah, I'm definitely glad I picked this up, especially considering, Harley is one of my favorite comic book characters. So that's everything I read in March. Let me know down below in the comments, what did you read? How did you do with your planned reads? What book was your favorite that you read this month? I'd say it's kind of hard for me to pick, because they were all pretty good, but I don't feel like anything in particular really stood out to me. However, there is one that I'm working on right now that I feel like kind of is. So I'm excited about that and excited to share it with you next month. And as always, if you like this video, hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications. You'll be notified every time I post a new video. And I will see you next time in the book cave.